Well, that's Welcome to Lansing Online News Radio. This is WLNZ LCC Radio here at 89.7 in Lansing, Michigan. I am Bonnie Buckaroo, soon to be joined by my co-host Bill Castanier. We're amazed that Nintendo Tech works. Tonight it worked.
It worked. We're just listening to something a little different in there, but
who knows?
I can actually hear us.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about early on tonight, Bill, was that when I got home this afternoon, you and I had been chatting down the Grand Wire today. Was very happy to find out they now have air conditioning. Life is good. It makes it a much more enticing place when the days are this hot. Got home and got a telephone call. It was quite interesting. It was a push poll who was asking me, there were 3 candidates for the race. One of the names was Walt Sword. Which one were you going to vote for? We only have 4 short questions for you on our survey. So I hit the little button that said Walt Sword, and they said, well, would you be as likely to vote for Walt if you knew that he was going to raise your taxes as his first day on the job in order to pay for more electric car chargers like the car he drives? I thought, no, I mean, that's bizarre, right? I mean, you could tell right away that it was a push poll. So they said, if you would be strongly suspicious of voting for him, click 1. If you are somewhat, suspecting voting for him, click 2. And if it wouldn't make any difference, click 3. Right? Press 3 on your phone. Well, of course, I pressed 3. It repeats the whole message over again. So I press 3 again. I mean, this goes on like 5 times. They're not really taking any poll. They just want to make sure
you hear the message. Like a discount approach to polling. That's
pretty lame.
Pretty lame question.
Well, what they're trying to do is, persuade you it's a poll, but give you the negative information on Walt. And apparently, it's a big deal that he drives a Volt.
But if that's the only thing they can come up with, it's pretty
lame.
There better be something else out there.
It's pretty lame, but I thought that was
he drives a Volt.
Yes.
Ooh.
And you would think in a state like Michigan that might be a good thing.
Drives a car, so who cares? And it's probably, was it made here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Remember, we used to get into that, of course.
Right.
Car. That's hardly ever brought up anymore.
I think it was a twofer. He's going to raise your taxes, number 1, and he drives one of those tree hugger cars. I think that was the idea.
He's an environmentalist.
I really can't get into those. But I posted it on Facebook, and so we'll be interested.
There was one of those odd robo-dials, was it 2 weeks ago, about Bernero? Calling a city council person a dyke, basically, or a transvestite. I forgot what it was. He said she looked like a man. I forget what exactly he was trying to say. But that went out very quickly, and I know people that got 3-4 of the same calls.
Why would they be doing that when he's not really up for election? Just a smear?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
So maybe you can do it from your home now.
Maybe it's really easy on a Skype system or something.
Yeah, maybe. But that would be miserable.
That would be miserable. Well, I made the mistake one time a few years ago of voting Republican, so it put me on a whole new set of lists. And I must admit,
did you?
Oh yeah, it was in one of those primaries where you could, the
crossover.
Yes, the crossover is kind. I was trying to mess them over. I was going to vote for the person that they don't want to have elected here. But that put me on all these, and I got news for you. You do have a lot more money because they call me all the time. The Democrats never hear from me. Vote for them all the time, nothing. But boy, those Republicans, I'm always being invited onto a town hall call with Representative Mike Rogers, and I made the mistake of getting onto one of those. He was taking calls pre-set up from people in London, England, before he would let me get on the line. I mean, these were such scripted. Oh, God, they were just kind of good. So there's a lot of money that goes into that stuff.
And it's easy to do. I did those for a while.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. It was really simple. I mean, it wasn't simple to me, but it was all done, it was obviously all done through the computer. And
set them up and they go.
And the zip codes and the prefixes you picked. Bang, bang.
Well, speaking of Facebook, I had a little to-do last week where I happened to have been walking through the alley behind the Army recruiters, the Armed Forces recruiters there in East Lansing. And they have this tricked out SUV with big fancy silver grille. They have a hand painted saber on the side. I mean, it's designed to be every teenage boy's dream car. It's all gorgeous with all this highly polished chrome. So I took a picture of it and I posted it on Facebook. And you know me, the anti-war pacifist in the group. I had said, I didn't think that it was quite. I was not thrilled to see my tax dollars being used to lure young kids into the military by using these kinds of gimmicks. And within an hour, Facebook had pulled it because somebody had complained and it violated their community standards. First of all, I don't see how it violated their community standards.
What is their community standard?
What it led to, I wrote an article for LansingOnlineNews.com and put it up there, and I found out since then there's a group that's constantly trolling to see any kind of military references, and if it's at all derogatory or anti-military, they're immediately pulled. But it's turning out that I think what's happening on Facebook, because it sort of unleashed a lot of other people telling their stories, because Facebook really doesn't want to have to pay someone to have to check out these complaints and make a rational decision about whether to pull it or not. It's just, we get a complaint, we pull it. But there's no appeals process. They don't give you a link to complain back and say the person was wrong or please take a second look. I ran into this on Facebook many years ago when I put up a student's video. He didn't have a YouTube account yet. I had loaned him my camera and he shot some footage of the KKK rally in Lansing. And we put up the footage and it got pulled. And the argument was that it was hate speech. Well, of course it was hate speech. That's what the KKK masters in. That's their calling card. But the whole idea was that, that means we should listen to what they're saying and see if they're drawing any kind of audience. It doesn't mean I was endorsing it, but there's no policy there either for any kind of appeal.
So you think if there was a pro-military, I could call and complain and see if they could?
Well, that's what I wonder. We'll have to play a little tag here, Bill. You put up things and I'll complain about them, and we'll see how long
that's a
you
really good
I'm
idea.
going to complain about my own posts and see what happens. Like maybe my post about my cat. See if that violates community standards.
We're joined by Doug Bloss, and yes, I know. Doesn't that strike you as?
Yeah.
Facebook to me has a sort of public trust element, even though it's a private corporation. And suppressing free speech to the point where if anybody decides to complain, they automatically pull seems to me to be a bad policy.
I'm curious whether that's the case or not.
I do. I want to know. And I ran into a couple people who had been, much to their surprise, they found their whole account canceled.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, they've been pulled completely.
Because
They had
been complained about?
Yes. If you get enough complaints, apparently then they pull you. So you have to be, if you have somebody who's sort of a troll following you and complaining about you, you have to be kind of careful. When I think of what a role social media plays in our lives now, it's not clear to me that I like that idea, because you don't have any choice when you sign the terms of service. You can't say, but I would like to have an appeals process if anybody disputes this. Not a good thing.
Well, and there are so many pro-military things out there. As I mentioned today at Gone Wired, I was at a Tiger game yesterday. Somewhere in the middle of the game, they announced a lieutenant colonel, and we should all stand for him. And I said, well, did I miss something here, or what? Did he hit a home run? I stood for Cabrera when he just threw 300. I didn't quite get that, but that's the extent it's gone. Big sports is all about the military.
They do seem to be part of that same sort of mindset. They reinforce one another. I've been shocked at watching the media that always prides itself on being so even-handed and not taking sides, being so relentlessly pro-military all along the way. It's become really sort of a propaganda machine for the government in terms of its war policy. We don't see much discussion anymore.
But what we're going to see isn't Tom Izzo. He's not playing on an aircraft carrier. He's playing on some military thing.
Did they find another place for him?
Yeah, I forgot what he's doing. He's got a basketball game set that's for the military again.
Because you wrote about that the last time.
Yeah, it was not well received.
Oh,
many people mentioned it to me.
They were going to send people to your home with fire bombs, that kind of thing?
And I just was trying to point out that it's part of that whole military-industrial complex that we don't realize we get sucked into.
Or maybe they were just going to give me free tickets to the Dark Knight.
Right. yeah. They weren't going to give me free tickets to the basketball game.
No,
But yeah, he's
no.
got something scheduled for the fall. But I don't recall exactly what the gimmick is this time.
Well, we did see over the weekend the murder out in Aurora, Colorado, where I do have some ties to old policing friends who were out there in that city. I found out one of them had gone on to the state police, so they're not still out there. But I thought 60-second response was fairly dramatic. 60 to 90-second response, because basically the police department is right next door. The fact that the gentleman, well, I shouldn't go on the gentleman, but the fact that the young man's magazine, 100-clip magazine, jammed, I guess. I mean, imagine that he was able to shoot 70 people even with faulty equipment. Imagine if that he could have easily killed. If that hadn't jammed, he could have easily killed many more. It's just a staggering kind of thing. I'm beginning to reach the point where I don't think, they're very quick to say with the mainstream media when they come on that we're all very upset about this. It seems to me if we were really upset, we'd do something about it. I think we may anguish and have compassion for the victims, but we don't seem to be very intent on solving this problem. I mean, we see a similar number of people, unfortunately, killed over the weekend in Chicago. And I worked down there many years ago doing anti-violence work down when Cabrini Green was still standing, and many of those places were there. And I remember talking to elementary school kids who would tell me not only that they had had one friend killed by gunfire, they had had two. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's so far outside the experience of many of the kids who grow up in privileged suburban neighborhoods that they have no connection to that kind of life at all. They can't even believe that it's occurring in their own country. And I think that, we're so shielded from that. The media makes a very big deal out of this one incident, but they don't go to Chicago for the weekend and talk about what's happening there.
Because it was about a movie for one thing. There's that, and there's all the human interest stories of people jumping over the seats to save their girlfriend and that sort of thing. And that became that's all I didn't watch a lot of the coverage of it, but what I did watch was simply I would call pornography of emotional pornography of the people who've been involved in the incident. And as you say, this sort of incident can happen all over the country, and no one had any intention to it at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's commonplace, unfortunately. Now we're seeing an escalation in the homicide rates again. Back in the early 90s, when I was doing that work, the homicide rate peaked in 1993 at about 22,000. Mm-hmm. And it declined as low as 15,000. Since then, 14,000, I think, was the absolute low that it got to. But it's going back up again. We're dealing with a combination of hard times, lack of opportunity,
access to guns.
Access to ammunition. I mean, the story I read this morning was that he purchased all of the ammunition online. But there was no regulation of it whatsoever.
6,000 rounds.
Right.
I heard a woman today say, and she's right because I always give them a hard time about it, if I go in to get my Sudafed, I have to sign. And every time I sign, I say to the clerk, I'm taking this home to start a very tiny meth lab.
Yeah. I'll be back.
The people at mine don't like me anymore. But, I mean, we sign away our lives to get our hands on 48, that's all you can get, and one count is 48 Sudafed. Mm-hmm. But you can go in and get 6,000 rounds of ammunition, and nobody tracks it.
Stunning to me. I couldn't believe that.
On Amazon, for example, anytime I buy anything, Amazon is very good at prompting me and saying, well, wouldn't you like another one of these? Yeah. They've got these stalker ads then following every place I go. This guy can buy 6,000 rounds and no little thing pops up anywhere that says somebody's amassing an arsenal like this. Oh.
Lucky he didn't buy Sudafed, though.
I know, yeah. Then they'd have got him. I'm not so sure we really have the will to deal with some of these things.
No, we don't.
We don't right now, for sure.
What will it take, you think?
People talking.
People talking.
People recognizing perhaps that they have a stake in some of the things that seem to be about other people than us. That actually we're all being harmed, and the corporate interests are shaping a plot to rebuild it. And this vote against their own actual interests. And I think we're at a point where either we're going to confront this now or never. In the workshop I was doing today, actually, we had people talking about how at one point in our history we recognized the social needs of people, and back earlier in the 20th century, and then in the 60s, in the civil rights movement, and people coming together and recognizing, yes, racism is a real thing, it's wrong, it shouldn't happen, and we had social policy change, and we had laws change, and things got better. We hit the 80s, and the whole sort of narrative of the country is it's personal responsibility, it's every individual for himself, all this stuff that we say is like social problems are really just an excuse for things. And
Whining.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think right now there's so much evidence that there is oppression, there is privilege across many different types of kinds of difference. And if we don't do something about it as a people now, we're going to be in trouble.
This is LCC Radio WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Doug Bloss, and he's with the Ingham County Health Department, and his actual title is Health Equity and Social Justice. You are the director of that program. Coordinator, all right. And I think, we were talking earlier that one of the challenges is to have people who do enjoy privilege understand that they have privilege.
Right. I do basically, we as a health department tried a few years back to join other health departments across the country who are recognizing that social justice issues are critical to preventing the disparities that we've been having for many, many decades. African American, and the most sensitive one is African American mortality, is about as much as 5 times as high as for white mortality in our county. It's about 3 times as high right now. And this is consistent across the country, and actually all the leading causes of death. African Americans die sooner and with more suffering than white people. This is there; it's been there. So as a discipline, public health has to address this in some way and recognize what's really going on here. And we know from a lot of research that has been done, it's not about genetics, it's not about behavior, it is about racism.
Yes.
And so
institutional racism,
personal, also interpersonal. I mean, it operates at many levels.
Okay.
But certainly the structural kind that's been embedded in our country throughout its history is one important part of it. So yeah, we were talking about privilege and white privilege and the whole concept that the team of people that I got to work with to create the workshop that we do. We do a 4-day workshop. It's open to our staff have to go through it, and members of the community are also invited to come through it.
Oh, that's great.
And privilege is a central piece of it. And just to speak of it at a personal level, I mean, as a white male, I didn't know I had privilege for a long, long time. It was not clear. It was not obvious to me at all. I thought that my job, cultural competency, was to understand what the experience of people of color is, to understand that, and to be a better person, to appreciate that better, to understand what a woman goes through, and what a woman's experience is, and to understand it would be less sexist if I could do that. It was a big revelation when I finally realized that my job was to understand what it means to be white,
right,
and to be male.
And what that responsibility means.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the fact that just because I am white and certain things come to me without doing anything together.
Yeah.
Now, I've worked hard in my life, and many white people who hear the idea of white privilege respond strongly with, but wait a minute, I worked very hard. Well, yes, you did. And that's right, it's true, you did. We're not saying you didn't, and you didn't create this thing called white privilege. You didn't put those structures into place. But there's a quote that I love, and I can't tell you who said it, which is unfortunate. But I just heard recently, I'm responsible for the house I live in, but which I did not build. So I mean, I didn't create white privilege, but I benefit from it all the time.
Right.
And so the thing is, what do I do with that? I can't give it away. I mean, it's going to be with me no matter what. It's a bank account I can go back to over and over again, and it'll never get depleted. And so, what do I do with my white privilege? I have to use it. I have to use it to try to make other white people understand what's going on. Yeah. And I have to start to see this. Because we all suffer from it. Ultimately, we all suffer from this inequity that we have in our society.
So, could you give us a simple example of how we use it?
How we use white privilege?
Mm-hmm. Or how it manifests, you mean?
I think our listeners would probably like to hear.
Well, that's 2 separate questions.
Yeah.
How we use it or how it manifests. So, which are you?
Start out with manifest.
Okay, well, certainly. I mean, we know today that even though we have laws that say, I think like gender privilege right now, laws that say that a man and a woman cannot be treated differently in terms of salary and sort of thing. And yet, the study after study shows us that women are doing the same like this men are still earning 80 cents or less on the dollar. No. How does that happen? Well, maybe you enter a job market and you get hired to the job and you say what you want and they start you at step 5 instead of step 1. Maybe a woman doesn't say that because she knows that if she does, she's going to be treated differently from a man. There's all the ways it can happen, even though it's illegal. And I think that actually could apply with race as well. Certainly, as a white man entering an institution, if I had a different sort of name that marked me as being a person of color, either Latino sort of name
Yeah.
or an African sounding name in some way, I might not even get the interview. There's plenty of studies that have shown that the African American had the same qualifications as a white person applying for the same job. The white male with a felony conviction will get hired more often than the African American has a clean record. I mean, this is there. It's out in front of us.
40 years ago, I was hired in a magazine. I was the first woman in the American Ag Editors Association. I was so happy to go to their annual conference, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, "Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?" I said, "I'm very impressed by your writing. Of course, I'm preening. I'm so happy. I'm accepted." And he says, "Is it true you'll work for half? Because if so, I'll hire a woman, but otherwise I don't think I can." but at least he was honest, I mean, the challenge is the ones that think they're your friend.
Because modern forms of oppression are usually much more subtle.
Yes, they are.
A good friend of mine worked for a state agency where they did a lot of mucky muck entertainment.
Yeah.
I'd be economic development. And African American. And kind of finally, I mean, through her whole life, she's been put over the edge. She's a very cool person, and she speaks out. But she was at one about 6 months ago, and it was at a golf course, and there was an event going on, and she couldn't find. She's in charge of the event, making it go right. She couldn't find something she needed, so she's going through cupboards, and one of the people, the guests there, accused her of looking for something to steal. She just flipped out.
Yeah.
I mean,
10 years ago, I would have found that so hard to believe that story, but I've heard a similar story many times.
And I was just like, oh my God.
I know, and we don't know that. We don't know that happened. And to get to your question of what do you do with the privilege, a lot of my colleagues, usually we do workshops. We have the first team doing the workshops. So my partner is usually, my co-facilitator is usually an African American woman. My boss, for example, at the health department, I do workshops with her. She's an African American woman. And one thing we've had to recognize, it pains us greatly. The one thing we have to recognize is that when I talk about racial privilege, white people hear me. They do not hear it when she talks.
Isn't that interesting?
If she talks about heterosexism, they will hear her, even though they will hear me, a gay man, talking about heterosexism. So, I mean, there's this whole thing of it sounds like you're asking for something, it's all your perception, it's like we have this thing going on, that's, even though it's not conscious all the time. So, using your privilege means talking to people who have the same privilege as you have, and slowly walking them through understanding how it's real and it's there. And yes, it doesn't mean you didn't work like that. It's a benefit you get without asking for it.
I ran into a situation many years ago. I was made the president of the Michigan Rural Safety Council, and one of our tasks was to try to put together first aid kits, and we were going to give them away for free. That we got a donor that was willing to do this, and we were going to put them into the migrant labor camps in western Michigan. And one of the people at the table used a racial slur and started talking about how if you're going to put it in those kind of places, make sure you don't put knives in there because you know how those people are with knives. And I was the president of the council sitting at the head of the table, and I'll be honest about it, I didn't know what to do. Because part of the challenge, I think, when you're in a situation like that is that when something that blatant lands on the table, I just gasped, but I didn't know what to say. How do you learn the right things to say to handle a moment like that without causing more problems and doing more damage rather than, how do you lead people to the light rather than drive them back down into the dark?
Well, a couple of things about this. We really want to, one thing we say often, we don't want you to become a social justice police. We're not asking you to just like sort of, because the worst thing that could happen in our workshops is that people learn what they're supposed to not say. The mistakes are where you learn the most. So every time something like that happens and it's out in the open, you can identify it and say it's there. That's huge. It's a huge opportunity to educate. Now, is that person going to be educated in front of a room full of people? Is that going to help them? No, they're going to retreat and become very defensive about it. So obviously the important thing to do in a situation would be to find the moment to say, I just want to offer you a perspective on what you just said and how I received it. And I'm not telling you you're wrong in your perception, even though in my mind I'm thinking you're wrong in your perception. I mean, I think it's very important we emphasize dialogue. Dialogue means you listen and you help other people listen to you, as opposed to like hammering people and saying, what you did is terrible. You should never ever be able to speak in public again. I mean, you don't want to get that message across.
Exactly.
So that'd be my message. Now I know why I don't have your job.
Exactly.
I can't handle those kinds of things well.
It's not easy.
No.
You had to be trained to do this, and I'm not. I'm pretty upfront with people who do things like that. I get right in their face, even if I don't know.
We're even careful about our nonverbals. We
Yeah.
don't want to have people thinking we know the answer and you're totally.
And I respect people that do what you do because I can't do that.
I'm the person in the back of the room rolling their eyes, sighing,
There's a
gasping.
place for all of this. There's a place for all of this. This is not bad.
You want me in the back of the room to set you up?
I want you in the workshop to say the stuff that I can then facilitate.
Okay. Well, I would be the right person for that.
People are still doing that. They're still saying those things. I mean, we have stepped way back before the 60s.
And people learn not to say them in front of you because you don't want them.
Oh yeah, you quit hearing them after a while, right?
Well, I mean, to follow up, I applied for a job at the California Farmer, which was owned by a man who had helped to start the John Birch Society. That was a clue. I applied for the job and I got a letter back from him and he said, "You really are a good writer." But he said, I just decided that I really need a man for this job, not a woman. So I'm sorry, but we're not going to be interviewing you. And so I thought, well, this is a lost cause anyhow. This will be fun. And I sent Jack a letter. I said, "Dear Jack, it's a really interesting idea that you have to hire people by the size of, shall I politely call them testicles, as opposed to their brains." And I said, "I wonder how that's working out for you. Maybe that's why your magazine looks the way it does." Jack had the courage to call me out, flew me out to California. I mean, took me around to places. And he actually said to me later, he said, "I really have to apologize to you." He said, "I was just wrong." He said, "That was just wrong." And he said, "You called me on it, and that was a good thing." Now, that situation worked out to be positive. I didn't take the job, I didn't trust him. But, it was a case where he was willing to consider that maybe he was looking at it the wrong way.
You have to choose your moments when to engage and when to confront. All these things are all very important. There are moments when you're going to get farther with confrontation and some are going to get farther with engagement. Empathize or
do people revert to type under stress as well? Is it even difficult for people who are struggling to, after they take your workshop and they're trying to make changes, but so often when they end up in stressful situations? So one of the things we talked about when I used to train police was that it was always important. One police chief said to me, "I really do want to get rid of the officer who is causing me more problems than he's solving other than me because of the way he treats people. But I always think that no matter how much training I give them and how much work I do, once they end up in a stressful or dangerous situation, they may revert back to their old behavior."
Well, we're talking about consciousness and mindfulness and understanding what's motivating you. And what I've been struck by, we've done 30 of these workshops now over the last 3 years, the people that come in really thinking they're going to hate it and not want to be part of it, end up being the ones saying this was like life-changing for me. But I saw things I didn't think were true. The ones who have the hardest problem are the liberal folks who come in thinking, "I got this down, I understand this, I see it, I understand that, I understand racism. I'm not racist, of course, but I understand it." And then come out of it thinking, "Oh my God, I've still got work to do."
Right.
That's really troubling for those folks. So I would say what we're trying to do is make some things that are made invisible by our society that we are really trying not to see, like privilege and oppression in all its forms. Trying to make people see that, help people see that so that they can't stop seeing it. So they will see it the next time it occurs in their life. These folks that didn't want to be there, but now they're just thinking, "Oh, this is interesting. I didn't know this was happening." But then they start to think differently, and then they start to act. That's our theory of change.
How do we tease out the groups that are having the roughest time right now? Does it appear to you that we've made some progress on African American issues? We've made some progress on these questions, but that we're still struggling with things like LGBT issues. We seem to be at a critical moment for those.
There's really no value to putting them on a hierarchy as far as who's most present and who's not. But there's only bad consequences from doing that. What we try to do, we talk about targeted and non-targeted groups. In other words, various types of oppression. Who's targeted for oppression, being treated as less than, and who's given privilege. And we try to emphasize the fact that everybody experiences privilege at some point in their life. Even if it's just simply as being an adult or being younger people, or being a middle-aged person or even an older person who's now the victim of ageism.
Yeah.
Everybody experiences it at some point in their life. And that our experience of oppression and privilege can help us understand the other side of the fence across other different groups. That's our hope. And so I know that I have many African American friends who hate the comparison of LGBT oppression to their experience because they don't want that grafted onto their narrative. I understand that. I respect that. But there are places where my way to get to empathy is to understand what's happening to me as a gay person, and see how it crosses over into the experience of others. It's not perfect, but I think it's a way to understand.
Is it easier to get people to understand that in a community like Lansing?
Yes. I love Lansing.
Yeah,
Really?
I do. I think Lansing is a community where you can get your mind around. I come from a very small town in Michigan. Lansing is just the right size for me in terms of a city. It is a city, and it has city characteristics, but you can get your mind around it, and you can be part of it. Your voice can be heard without too much.
So I was wondering, because it's just, that would be my observation, just from what you observe and read and feel, that the city is more open. There's still certainly lots of racism and all types of things.
It's different here, though. We've done some different, like focus groups around different cities for different projects that have happened. And there's something about Lansing where people, the white parents, the parents of color, actually, and workers as well, did a great job of teaching their kids who are now in their 30s and 40s, that it's an equal world and we can do well. I have a colleague who's an African American woman who says that she didn't ever realize she was African American until working with me for a while in this workshop. She says, I thought I was white. I really thought I was white. And it's an interesting thing because it does create this sense of the desire for equality that I think is there in most of Lansing. We're not as segregated as some cities are. And I just have a lot of hope for this place. I love this city.
I do too, and I'll be honest about it. I mean, I suspect on the spectrum, Ann Arbor may consider itself more enlightened.
Consider is the operative word.
I know, and they're very.
Workshops out there.
but there's something smug about that in a way that I.
Not much. I'm there a lot.
Yes.
They're not a school of choice by choice. The minorities tend to live in Ypsilanti.
Yes.
It is a very conservative city. People don't believe that. I mean, it's tremendously conservative.
There's something about thinking you're the most liberal place in the world that makes you very conservative.
It just shocks me.
Well, I told you about the guy who was the conservative that offered me, wanted to pay a woman half, but I actually ended up working for a liberal who lied about the fact that he was only paying me half.
Well, there you go. That's in a nutshell, isn't it?
I know it is. It's so frustrating. It is so frustrating. People. I mean, I worry about it myself. I constantly search my soul and try to root out anything that I can find that makes me feel privileged and arrogant and superior to anybody else. But I often find it interesting. You said that everybody has some area in which they are that they enjoy privilege. I have a good friend, and he does some work with gangs and so forth, and he's an African American prof, and he and I would go to meetings together, and it was always interesting because they would assume, we were both there talking about violence issues, and they would always assume that when they were talking about all of the problems of the inner city and all of the dangers and problems that they had, that they would turn to him for answers, right? Because he was the one who would have those special insights. Right. He actually came from a fairly affluent family, of politicians and school teachers, and I was the kid carrying the knife to school in 4th grade in the city. I mean, it was a different. But there's this perception problem, and we do ascribe privilege on very superficial things to certain groups of people. And they do get that sort of, here, you get to cut the line.
And because he's an African American, he should be able to speak for all African Americans.
Absolutely, and he should understand those issues in a way that no one else could. Yeah. Very interesting. So how does this position work? You train mostly staffers, but other outside people can come? You hold community workshops?
We have workshops. There's about 20 to 25 people in this workshop, and 10 to 15 of them usually are staff. We try to get all the staff through it for the past 3 years. There's about maybe 50 or 60 still to go. And yeah, we've been doing it 6 to 8 times a year. And we've been hired actually to do it in other communities now. For the state, the one I did today, I directed for this Michigan Department of Community Health. Yeah, and so far it's free. We'll probably have to charge after all my grants run out. I'll have to charge people to come to it. And I'm sure we'll try to make it as open as possible.
I've got a question. Because I worked in government, and I know there's this dashboard kind of measure results. Can you, in your organization, see a difference?
Can we see a difference?
After you do this training over a period this length of time now, I mean, is there something noticeable?
Because nowadays, for any grant, you have to do the evaluation piece to show the impact.
Well, our quantitative evaluation is basically a pre and post test, and they've been pretty impressive in terms of the changes in attitudes of people and perceptions of people and awareness of people. What I've heard more anecdotally are that as we never have more than 2 people from any work unit at the same time, so it's sort of a very gradual thing. So like maybe one of our clinics at the health department, every few months, a couple of people from the clinic staff will go through the workshop, and they tell me that every time that happens, the conversation starts again. They start to talk about what they're doing and how they may be, unintentionally discriminating or oppressing certain people, how their policies run and things like that. So it's an incremental thing, and I've had a lot of people who email me after the fact to tell me they've got a situation going on, and we talk through basically what can you do about this. Like someone at the front window might be treated differently if they don't speak the English language. And then we talk about, is that a personal thing? Is it that one person who's having this issue and having this stuff going on? If that's the case, then we've got to work with that person and talk to it. If it's an institutional thing, if it's basically that somehow we allow that to happen, then that has to be dealt with the supervisor. And they've been remarkably, I haven't had to we offer to intervene if necessary. Our team will put in do dialogues within our work team if necessary. But after the conversations, quite often someone's able to say to somebody, I'm noticing you do this. Do you know that you're doing that? And what do you think? And they're sort of shocked and obviously, no, I didn't want to do that. I didn't realize I was doing that. It's going very well. So I think a change is happening.
Well, that's probably one of the more important measures, actually.
Right.
If you didn't think that, you'd probably go,
sure.
This isn't good.
One last question. With the rising level of inequality in the culture and the shrinking of the middle class, it seems to me that the issue of class is always a very difficult one to tease out and to deal with. And are you seeing, is that a challenge for you in the workshops, and how do you deal with those kinds of issues of inequality?
The problem of that particular kind of inequality lies beyond our workshops, I think. But I mean, we do talk about it. At times, I would rather talk about corporate manipulation, than the issues of racism, class as well. I don't know. I mean, I feel that the inequality we're experiencing right now is at such a macro level that I mean, it has to be acknowledged that this is happening. That the bailout of the banks, for instance, the whole choice to do that.
Well, my neighbors who are losing their homes are not getting no help at all.
Why people can't. We don't go there in the workshop necessarily because we try to work with the lived experience of the people in the room.
Right.
But sometimes it does come up. Sometimes that will be an issue for people and they'll bring it to the table. We don't force that onto the table. Because to do that, we wouldn't be doing dialogue, we would be doing community organizing. And actually, I wanted to say that we're sort of realizing that our transition from dialogue to community organizing is something we have to do. We can't organize as public health employees. We'd never think of doing that. It wouldn't be appropriate. But we can work with groups that are practicing discipline of direct organizing and sort of thing, and share with them the data that we have about inequality, without the intent of directing what they should do with it. We're recognizing that the change has to occur through means beyond what public health people right now can do.
Right. Speaking of privilege, it seems dazzling to me that we are on the brink, potentially, especially if Europe continues to go into the number, of electing our first American president with a nice Swiss bank account. I mean, when you want to talk privilege, I don't hang out with any people. I'm a dope, Swiss bank account.
Swiss Army knife.
The Swiss Army knife? That's as close as
Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
As far as
we could do an ad here.
We're going to have you back, Doug. This is a fascinating topic, and I think it fits in very well. We're going to make a transition now. We're going to welcome our next guest, Mary Pollack from Michigan Now, National Organization of Women. Now, there's a group that maybe we can start enjoying a little more privilege if we can. Let me get you right here, Mary.
I was involved in a conversation where I won't say where it was, but it was a little bit about privilege, and I said, somebody's going to have to write the new Ugly American for domestic purposes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I didn't, because they sort of were offended I said that about what they were talking about. You can't go into a community and do those things.
Yes.
You're an ugly American when you do that.
Yes. No, it's a fascinating issue, and I don't know quite how we're going to tease that out for the future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
This was
Ada.
Great
wonderful.
fun.
Thank you.
My partner is dinner waiting for me. So
Good. And we'll cut you back and we'll talk corporate.
Thank you, Lucy.
We are joined by Mary Pollock, and she has been keeping an eye. This has been a busy summer for women at the Capitol.
Yes, it has. Even though the legislature's been gone, there's been plenty of activity.
That is a surprise, isn't it?
They left June 3rd for the summer, except they were back one day, July 18th.
Yes.
They're coming back one day, August 15th.
August 15th?
Yes,
Oh,
and
I
then
bet
they're
people are
back.
preparing.
Then they're back September 11th for a few weeks before they go back to campaigning.
These are the guys that some of them complain about teachers having the summer off.
Yeah, these
Okay,
are
I
the
just
same
wanted-
people.
Yeah, I was just wondering. It's privilege. That's called privilege, I guess.
So, yeah, we last time I was here was well before Vagina Gate.
Yes, yes.
Yes. That has had worldwide interest.
The Guardian picked it up and
Yes.
made it a huge story, so it went international immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel Maddow picked it up and carried it. It really became a powerful story. I think Michigan was on the map for being
Oh yes,
focused.
yes. At the Now National Conference, I would say that every hour I heard somebody comment about what was going on in Michigan. And when I met people and they found out I was from Michigan, they wanted to know more detail about Vagina Gate. They didn't call it Vagina Gate, but they call it suppression of speech. Basically, that was what people were responding to, putting some women down.
Right,
And
visibly.
not letting them speak, especially about abortion rights. If it would have been suppressing their speech about something else, I don't think there would have been quite as much outrage about it. And then the cuteness of using the word vagina and vasectomy,
Yeah.
kind of, and I don't think the Speaker of the House and his minions understood that there has been, I don't know, something like 14 years of the vagina monologues.
Right.
Eve Ensler's performance that practically every college in America does every year.
Yes, yes.
And in communities. And so the women's community has heard a lot about vagina, and are used to saying it. And in fact, the word vagina is taking on a new meaning, kind of like the word woman.
Right, right.
Now, on July 18th, we had a rally called Women Are Taking Back the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the groups had a big banner that says, vaginas are revolting. Okay? And so you can take that two ways.
Yes.
Vaginas, meaning women,
Yes.
are creating a revolution or
Yes. In revolt.
And in revolt, and or you can take it like vaginas are icky, revolting. And so the double entendre there was
That
humorous.
was very clever. I loved some of those.
Yeah.
I loved, we ran an article by Anne Larrabee where she went through a sort of history of all the things that happened this summer from her personal perspective. It was a wonderful article.
Beautifully written.
Yes.
Wonderfully done. We're very pleased to have it. And she wears her vagina hat to everything now, which is really, I saw her there.
This is just a little bit of an aside, but the Lansing Journal ran an editorial yesterday and Sunday that Bolger should,
Jace Bolger,
yes,
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House, because he was complaining about the women didn't have a proper decorum. Well, this whole thing that he just did with fixing an election somewhat wasn't the kind of thing that you would expect the speaker to do. So he didn't have a proper decorum. Maybe he should be taking a day off.
He should be in the corner.
Put him in the corner because he's throwing
time
a
out.
temper tantrum.
Yeah.
He needs a time out.
He could be the judge of everyone except
the
himself.
Detroit News and Free Press, I think, have called for more stringent action than a day's time out for him.
I think, yes.
I wrote an editorial, however, about that and about the fact that when the Detroit Free Press was listing Speaker of the House Bolger's sins, they did not mention the way in which he and his office had treated women. And I felt that was odd for the Free Press because the Free Press I always considered sort of our paper. They were the liberal paper against the conservative Detroit News. And yet they listed all of his sins that they could dredge up. They ignored all of the stuff that went on.
And July 18th, another silencing of women happened.
Yes,
that was Bart Byram attempted to discharge one of my favorite bills in all the world that we've been trying to get them to pass for 20 years, and that's the pay equity bill. She tried to discharge it from committee, and she got gavelled for quiet.
Yeah.
And I put that up. There was a picture of her with a quote from her. I put that up on Michigan Now's Facebook page, and it got like 3/4 of our friends on Facebook hit that and viewed it, and then lots of people shared it.
Yeah.
And I mean, second time for her.
There was so much going on that day. There was a group of women that delivered all those tens of thousands of signatures.
115,000 petition signatures from bold progressives to decry Bulger's silencing of the two women.
Yeah.
And that was very impressive, actually. We had the rally at 11 o'clock, and that was at 9:30. At 11 o'clock, we had a rally of probably a couple hundred women from all kinds of organizations there to remind them that we're watching. And this House Bill 5711 is
the super abortion bill.
Right. The omnibus, it's a closing clinics, abortion clinic bill, is still. It might have come up. It was not. They didn't have it on any agenda for discussion, but to remind everybody we're watching, they did have on one of the committees a bill that would give religious exemptions to many religiously affiliated hospitals and so forth, conscience exemption, and they put that on the agenda. I started calling. Saying, I have lots of people who want to testify. I had testified in June.
Yeah.
And so, where can I get more cards, And so Tuesday morning, they were still had it on the agenda, and then Tuesday afternoon, they pulled it because they found out, I think, about the rally, and I'm saying, we're going to have, they were saying they weren't going to take any testimony. I said, you need to think about that again.
Yeah.
Because that's silencing women again, and they did that in that first committee.
Again and again and again on this issue if they don't.
That's right. And so they just don't know how to handle women's issues very well.
But Mary, do you think it will matter in the outcome of any election?
Well, I think the observers say different things about that. I'm trying my hardest to make a difference. I'm trying to alert women that our Attorney General Bill Schuette has joined this case challenging the birth control mandate in the Affordable Care Act, using state money to challenge something that 98%, according to the Guttmacher Institute, 98% of all women of childbearing age will use artificial contraception at some point. And here is our Attorney General using money to challenge that. And that's a case the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops needs to challenge. We understand that. But not the state of Michigan. He needs to stay out of it. He needs to withdraw from that case. So, I keep trying to educate people. House Bill 5711's analysis just came out the other day. I put that up on Facebook. I get quite a few hits on it. Trying to keep people aware of it. This is happening. It's real, and you need to vote to put people in office who are for women's rights, basically.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. On the same day, there was also supposed to be a committee hearing. The Michigan State Medical Society had decided that they wanted to have homemakers, moms, be of worth absolutely no economic value. Right. So that when if you were sued for malpractice and you happen to injure a good old mom, right, then you wouldn't have to pay very much because your labor is not worth it.
There are a series of bills that called tort reform, which means personal injury law reform. And one of the witnesses...
That's a Frank Luntz term. It's really gutting your rights to collect if somebody hurts you.
Right. And so it was the suits versus the T-shirts. There were 100 more people in that room than were permitted by the fire marshal. And they were handing out T-shirts that said accountability, no immunity.
Oh.
And those were the T-shirts. And then the suits were all the lawyers representing the doctors, And so, yes, some witness did say that women, stay-at-home moms ought to be valued as zero.
Right.
And that really, that hit the wires pretty quick. I mean, if you've recently written out a check for child care, you'll realize that an infant's is like $1,200 to $1,500 a month if you hire somebody to take
I
care of
guess
an
what's
infant.
so shocking is, I mean, we were just talking with Doak and we were talking about progress and how most of the overt kinds of comments like that we think had gone away, but they haven't.
No,
Not
there's
when it comes to women. Oh no.
no, and this has been a common practice for a long time to devalue women in all kinds of ways. So, we still are fighting the fight over here in Lansing, and we need people to, pay attention.
It's a huge issue, and I'm glad to see. I'm involved with an event, as you are, that's coming up on Saturday night at Gone Wired from 7 till 10 o'clock at night, and it's called Va Va Voom, and all those V's stand for Vaginas, Voices, Vote, and Victory, because the whole idea is to really bring women of all different persuasions together, not just political women, but also artistic type women and women who just want to share
Oh
stories.
yeah, music and art and
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
They're going to be an open mic, and what I'm going to do is show up with my video camera. And for those who'd like to, those who don't want to go on camera, there's no problem with that at all. But for those who might want to, there are a lot of stories of women that we have to
I
start
think
capturing.
stories are so compelling.
Me too.
You told some stories about things that happened in your life about discrimination, and people, when they're in a group of folks that are starting to tell stories, then they're prompted to tell their own stories.
Yes.
And then people, there's a big sense of community around stories.
I agree.
And I think having an open mic and letting people tell stories is very, very important.
And I think it's younger women need to hear those stories more than anyone.
They do.
Because they can't believe it.
When I tell them,
they don't realize what people
Well,
went
I think
through.
young women are in school. School bullying is something that happens to them. Sexual harassment is something that happens to them. There may be something in sports that they notice that happens to them, but they haven't been out there in the economy suffering the consequences of discrimination or differentiation in the economy, in jobs. And they haven't faced, because they're not married, they don't know about family law and how that is configured and why it's configured the way it is, inheritance laws, the way Social Security is configured. I mean, there's, they haven't bought a house yet to know how the property rights issue works. I mean, there are so many things where the marriage is a basis of the law behind contracts, and so they just haven't faced those things yet. So older women talking to young women, a cross-generational thing. My stories about doing illegal abortion referrals before 1973 is, of somewhat of interest to people who've not faced that, haven't lived that way. And we might go back to that if some people have their way.
I am concerned.
Yes. And so women will have abortions whether it's legal or not.
Right. The question is whether it be safe.
So whether it will be safe and whether their health will be protected.
Yeah.
And there's a huge group of people that want to make it more difficult. So, they'd like to close down all the hospitals and all the clinics and all the doctor's offices that perform abortions right now. And
they're relentless in chipping away.
Yeah, in real small type ways that, for instance, this bill, House Bill 5711, one of the things it does is it requires the doctors who perform abortions 6 or more a month to have $1 million in liability insurance.
Only there aren't any insurance companies.
There are no insurance companies right now writing that.
Yeah.
It's not to say they wouldn't if it became law, but it would be so unaffordable that they would have to charge an enormous amount of money to cover the expense of the liability insurance. And it would discourage doctors from coming to our medical schools. It would discourage obstetricians and gynecologists from coming to our state. We already have a shortage. And in many counties, people have to drive 2 hours to have their baby somewhere.
Yeah.
And, we already have a shortage, and this would make the shortage worse. And that testimony has been out there.
I think Byron was silenced at one point, too, when she was trying to suggest that perhaps we should care as much about men and their vasectomies. So anybody who
we don't have a bill requiring that vasectomies be performed in a freestanding surgical facility. And vasectomies are done in doctor's offices and are more dangerous and more invasive than an abortion.
Yes.
but yet we're not going to have laws that have lots of restrictions, and you can't, you have to have it in a surgical center that costs millions of dollars to build, and the people doing it have to have $1 million liability insurance, and you have to take the little snippet that you took out and handle it like a dead body.
Oh, I know, and you have to tell the woman in advance.
Oh,
How
yes.
do you want these remains?
Right, and they have to see this thing by ultrasound and get counseling, have a 24-hour waiting period. I mean, it's just bizarre when you start comparing this kind of medical procedure, which 1 out of 3 women have in their lifetime,
Right. Right.
to the treatment of a male reproductive procedure.
Yes.
And so it's the people who want to ban abortions are saying this is dealing with a life. Well, so does a vasectomy dealing with a potential life. But they don't see it that way. And maybe that'll be the next target for them after they're successful banning abortions. They want to ban the
contraception.
Well, they want to ban contraception. That's what they're really going for, I think, in the long run.
I think we saw glimmers of that with Representative Santorum when he was running in the primaries, but I think people were stunned and still didn't believe it. They thought he must have misspoken or he was misunderstood. But there is really a group that wants to impose their values on the rest of us.
Yes, and by law, and we have a lot of legislators who believe that their duty is to vote the way their religion teaches them.
Yes.
In terms of values. Now, when you say what are the values, 10 Commandments, don't steal, and so we have laws that say don't steal, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But, abortion isn't mentioned per se, but they've kind of extracted that from what their understanding is of their particular religious.
Representative Lisa Brown gave such an impassioned talk that day. If you watch the video that is available online, she was talking about how in her Jewish tradition, the wife of the mother is often valued ahead of the life of the fetus because they've decided that they would save the mother first, whereas in the Catholic tradition it's been the reverse.
The reverse, that's right.
And so her argument was, just as I wouldn't expect my religion to impose my views on Catholic women, that should be their choice, we should not enshrine in the law those things that would impose their views on mine. And it seemed such an enlightened view to see how religions differ on these issues. So just saying that it's a religious conscience issue makes it sound as if there is some sort of monolithic religious conscience. No, the Reformed Jewish tradition has been that you must save the mother. It's not even an option.
Yeah, you must save the mother, and her health and her well-being is paramount. And I think I counted up there in most women's lives there were about 400 times that she could get pregnant, 400 months over her.
Is that right? I've never heard that figure. Yeah. Oh, that's great to know.
And so those eggs each month are you might say
potential human life.
Yeah, potential human life. But on the other hand, if you lose one to miscarriage or whatever, there's always another chance, at least until a woman becomes infertile. Yeah. And so why the concern over this one fertilized egg and wanting to enshrine all this and all kinds of laws that prevent any terminations of that particular fertilized egg or fetus if it becomes deformed or whatever. One of these bills, 5713.
The most common abortion is the spontaneous abortion.
Right, yes, that happens most of all, yes. 5713, House Bill 5713 would ban abortions at 20 weeks on the theory of fetal pain. But the fact is that many times the fetal anomalies can't be discovered or seen until about 18, 19, 20, 21 weeks. And if you're going to have a stillborn, or if you're going to have extreme problems with this that cause all kinds of disruptions of her organs and all kinds of things can happen, then a therapeutic abortion is warranted, but would not be permitted under this bill. No.
One of the most conservative people that I know, who is a colleague at the university, or was a colleague at the university, has had, he and his wife were delighted at their late stage in life to find that she's pregnant, but that bill put him over the edge, and he's now come over to our side.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to remind people, Saturday night, 7 o'clock, Gone Wired Cafe, and it will be va va voom, art and political messaging and open mic and all sorts of wonderful things. And I hope you join us there. And I hope you join us next week here at Lansing Online News Radio. Thanks to Mary Pollock for joining us. Michigan Now and Doug Bloss from the Ingham County Health Department. We'll see you next Monday night. Thank you very much. That's my husband's music. He recorded a theme song for us. I almost never get to hear it.